Hiya, welcome to my little mini tutorial from Crafters and Makers. I'm going to show you how to make this headband with a little twisted tie top. You start off with 2 rectangles of stretchy fabric, and the fabric needs to stretch along the long edges of the rectangle. It's not so important for it to stretch in this direction. And if you find the centre point of this rectangle, and I do this by folding, marking with a pin, you need to mark both edges. So I've got a pin on the centre point and measure about 3/4 of an inch from each side of the centre point. Or 2 centimetres, something like that. This is quite a rough measurement really. You want to get it fairly small because it helps with the tightness of the knot on the top. You only really need to worry about the markings on the first side. You can mark both of them if you want to, but you'll see why you might not need it later on when I sew that bit. So the first job is to take one of your rectangles, the one with the markings on, fold it in the opposite direction, and then we're going to stitch down either side. So I'm just using the edge of the foot, which is about 1 centimetre seam allowance. You can pin if you want to. And I'm going to set my machine to a zigzag. The width is 2 millimetres and the length about 2 millimetres as well, and that will give your seam a stretch as well. Make sure you do a forwards and backwards stitch at the beginning and at the end, and also if your machine's not stitching a very nice stitch, you might need to change the needle to put in a jersey needle or a ballpoint needle, and that will help the stitch to not slip. Yep, so we've got a nice stretchy seam there. I find if I don't have a jersey needle in on this machine, the stitches skip, but with a jersey needle it works perfectly fine. So we have 2 edges sewn and a hole that goes through at the top. Now this piece now needs to be turned the right way round. And you can access that hole at the top and push this piece through the hole. If you make your hole too small, it's a bit harder to get the piece through. You'll work out what is the perfect size. Right. Okay. So got now this piece. Now this centre point is going to be sandwiched in between these 2 pieces when you sew them. Like so. So you can get a rough idea of where the centre is, but you'll know for sure if you sew from the bottom upwards, keeping both sides even. You'll be able to work out where to stop sewing at this top edge, because you won't be able to sew anymore because there is this piece of fabric in the way. So I find it easier to pin at this point. So I put a pin at the top here. Just put the 2 in the middle to hold it in place. And then tuck all of this inside and you'll be able to match up the opposite edge. So at the top, watch out that you don't catch any of this in when you're sewing. So you'll be stretching it out, trying to sew as close as you can to that point without stitching over the fabric. I'm going to put my pins on the opposite side here so that I can start from the bottom and go upwards again. If you want to, you can mark this piece the same as the first one, and then you'll be able to find the little notch marks to match up at the top, and then you know for sure that you're getting it just right. There's quite a lot of leeway on this pattern. Okay. I'm getting the pin out of the way, but I'm pushing over the inner layer of fabric and just getting hold of the top two layers. Got as close as I can to be sure that I'm not stitching the underside. And same on the opposite side. Pull this over, make sure it's out of the way. I'm turning it back to a straight stitch now. Stitch length number 3 is fine. The last stitch to sew is here across the bottom edge, and it doesn't need to stretch. So you can do a straight stitch if you want to. And I'm finding the inner layer. Make sure it's not twisted on the inside. And these two seam allowances here will match these two seam allowances. So you want to kind of push them in and match them up so that they're nice and snug at that seam point. Let's go. Trying to make sure there's no folds in there. Make sure you give it a really good strong seam here. Last little bit of sewing. So stitch down either side across the bottom with this piece sandwiched in the middle like a sausage roll. When you pull out the inner piece through the hole at the top, you end up with a complete circle with a really nice little twisty knot at the top. And you can tuck in all of the excess, the seam allowances on those holes that you left. And being a stretch fabric, it shouldn't fray. There we are. Let's see what this one looks like. go. So they make good little stocking fillers, little Christmas presents, and you can make them out of extra bits of fabric that you might have left over from making other garments. So it's quite handy.